Hello and welcome to Conversations with Kurt. In Defiance, Ohio, we have celebrated the lives of many people who have, through their own work, have created a sense of what kind of worldly people we really are. None so much as Mr. David Dott, who's with us today, to kind of bring a little bit of exposure to his book, The Dragon Awakens. Now, through this book, basically what Mr. Dott is trying to convey is a little bit of fact along with some fiction regarding the continent or the people of China. So Mr. Dott, how are you today?
We'll see.
So tell me, you've put a lot of time and effort into this book, and a lot of research I know has gone into this, but give me a little bit of sense of what The Dragon Awakens is.
It's started out as nothing more than a research paper.
Okay.
And I decided that there's things going on in the Middle East that everybody's paying attention to, and I thought that they have really no real potential for serious life and death, crucial military sort of situation for the United States. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, but nobody's paying attention to China, and so I started looking into it, and I had all this information. I belonged to the Naval Institute. I got some documentation from the CIA before they got all touchy about giving out information and redacting things. I got stuff off the internet. I have my own library of about 20 or 25 books on international and national military. And I said, so that was just the beginning. That was the cornerstone of it, and I just built from there. And it took me over a couple of years.
Oh, sure.
Just to get it all together. Now, once I got it all together, I said to myself, this is going to be the driest piece of information. It was so dry. I mean, it is. And I said, I've got to find a way to tell people about this that gets them interested. Okay? So maybe they'll ask the questions of the politician or somebody that in academia could even find out, well, hey, maybe we ought to look into something like this. And so I said, I've got to tell the story that tells the information. Okay. So once I made that decision, it just kind of flowed. I said, well, how would I start it? And I started it 3 or 4 different ways. And after I got through doing it, I said, which one looks the best, which is the most interesting, which is the most stimulating, which would cause you to grasp an interest in it. So that's the first part of it. And each chapter, you're in 4 or 5 places at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So you could be in China, you could be in Washington, D.C., you could be in Hawaii with the chief of Naval Pacific Fleet, you could be aboard a Navy ship, you could be in Italy, whatever. All these places that are mentioned have a piece of the puzzle. And I try to use the characters to draw you in so that you would be interested. As it flows, the information is also imparted, and you get the information along with the story.
Okay.
But the information you're going to get is factual.
So all of this research that you put together is based upon, like you said, based upon some fact-finding.
Fact-finding.
When you started developing the book itself, you had a theme in mind, obviously, to stay with, like you said, primarily the Chinese military versus any other
country, yeah.
Right, and you're not really dealing with necessarily the economics of the country or the politics of it, for that matter.
Well, in the economics of it, China has a problem. If you look at the size of China on a map, it looks like, oh my gosh, and they've got all these people, billions of people.
Right.
But the problem is, 2/3 of that ground isn't worth growing a ear of corn on. Okay. It's either desert, mountains, or canyons, and it's awful. Okay. You can't do anything with it. Okay. So you're stuck with a section of China, which is, it starts at the mountains and goes to the Pacific Ocean. and the population is going to grow. Chairman Mao figured this out right after he took over China. And he realized we've got to do something. And he's tried all kinds of ways. He tried birth control, education, sex education. He tried one child for every family, all this kind of stuff. None of it's working. The population keeps going, doop, 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 doop. Sure. And so they have to sit there, what are we going to do with all these people? Right. And they are now, economically, they can afford, because we're buying all their goods,
sure.
Right? Yeah. They can afford to buy, well, they bought a pork processing plant in Georgia to process pork that they're going to send back to China.
Wow.
They're big pork eaters over there. They also buy rice from California. They buy rice from Vietnam, because their ground is very fertile in Vietnam. Okay. It's a big export. So they're buying all kinds of products and to feed this multi-billion population.
Right.
But it's still going to grow, and they're not going to be able to keep that up. So they have decided, they decided this years ago, decades ago. Yeah. They're going to have to move west.
That means on the same token then, obviously, along the way, they're going to start adopting and adapting to some of the things that they run into. And I think you kind of pointed that out in the book. I did read a couple of places where you talked about, how they adapt to Western civilization.
Yeah, it's a corrupting influence, and they're absolutely against, they hate the fact that the West, we as a small country with a very limited time frame, have created a military and economic power that they have. Here they are, one of the oldest countries in the world, and they can't come up. They can't figure out how we did it with an impure. They're racist. An impure racial background.
Sure, sure.
They don't believe in this multicultural stuff at all.
Right, right.
So they believe in learning. They'll send their students here and bring them back.
Find out how things work.
Yeah. They'll teach them.
So, and in the economic side of it, I guess what you're saying then is that because of the fact that they do import quite a few of our goods, at the same token, we're willing to import from them. They export back to us.
Yes, and the money that they earn from that sale of whatever, I don't care what you buy, a portion of that goes to their military. And they have been buying practically the Russian fleet. All right, yeah. They bought the Russian submarines, the Russian aircraft. I mean, when we show them how to, like a General Motors or somebody, how to build something, Cummins, let's say, the Cummins, the little engines for lawnmowers and stuff. Yeah. They copy it.
Oh, I see.
GM does this. They do the same thing. As soon as they get an idea, and they apply it, and they say, well, how can we use this for this? Yeah. And the factory is run by the military, and the people who work in it are soldiers.
Okay.
So that, this is a whole, and in the book, it explains the control that the military has at the very lowest level of their society. And I laid that all out. I said, he controls this, he controls that, he controls this. The priest, right on at the municipal level, right all the way up to the basic People's Liberation Army.
That creates quite a progress in the story. Now, tell me a little bit about the characters. I know you have mentioned, and I read a few things here and there. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I haven't read it from cover to cover. Oh. But I will get to that point at some point, and I'll explain myself. But I think that you develop the characters in the book based upon trying to convey, like you mentioned, each one of these chapters has a little bit different flavor to it. Yeah. So how did you come about the idea of coming up with these characters to tell the story?
It seems to flow. Yeah. I don't understand. In a way, I would write something down, and out of the clear blue sky. Mm-hmm. Like one of the main characters is a seaman by the name of Sims. Okay. And I said in there, they were talking about one of the guys had a nickname. All the radio men are called Sparks. Okay. That goes back to World War I. It's a termination. A bosun's mate is a bosun. And a gunner's mate is a gunner.
Gotcha.
Okay, and some kid, one guy named Copenhofer, who was talking a lot on the way, walking up a gangway, ran into one of the other petty officers on his, he was going to be in that same division,
Right.
and the guy says, "You have a big mouth," as he was walking by, and the next morning everybody on the ship was calling him Mouth.
Ah.
So you get a nickname for whatever, for whatever reason, and you're stuck with it. So when I said this, and the character Sims, I said, Sims says in his own way, he says, "Gee, I wonder if I'm going to get a nickname." Now, I just put that down just for the heck of it.
Right.
And then later on in the story, of course he's going to have a nickname. And I gave it to him.
I see.
Based on an incident that happened.
Don't give it away.
No, I'm not going to tell you. Based on an incident that happened to him.
Okay.
And everybody then would call him that nickname.
Wow.
So that was, it's just, but the title comes from, I was watching an old movie called 55 Days of Peking with Charlton Heston.
Oh, okay. Old school.
Okay, that's old, back in the 60s, I think, or 70s, early 70s. In the movie, he talks to David Niven,
Okay.
and he talks about the quote from Napoleon. And he said, Napoleon said, and he did, I double-checked this, when asked about China, he says, "Let the dragon sleep, for when it awakens, the world will tremble."
Okay.
So, seeing that I'm trying to illuminate people about the possibilities, military capability and possibilities, options of China, I thought it would be appropriate to call it The Dragon Awakens.
I see.
So that's how that came about.
Okay. Did you write the book with the intent of actually, once you got to the end and a person has read the entire story, the hope would be that they, like you said, go back out, try to get some information on their own?
Right.
So there's really not a conclusion to the book necessarily.
Well, the conclusion,
Not that we're giving away the
now
ending.
that we're good to give away the ending, the conclusion starts the same way Sims, one of the main characters, when he finally shows up to the ship, certain events take place which are normal to anybody who is applying to be on board that ship. He has his orders, he talks to the officer of the deck, they get the master at arms. The master at arms takes him to his divisional area, berthing space down below deck, and then assigns him a bunk and so forth and so on. And this is standard operating procedure for the United States. That's how the Navy does it. So he comes, but he's treated differently in the end. He has a medal. And everybody recognizes this award that he's got pinned on his shoulder.
Okay.
And when they see that pin, there's certain protocols that have to be followed when you're dealing with somebody who has that award.
I see.
And you see that this changes things as far as his ability. He thinks he's just an ordinary guy, but if you got that, you're not an ordinary guy anymore.
Right.
So that's how that ends. And then later on, after that's how the book kind of concludes. You see that this is going to have a real effect on him,
Yeah.
long term. And then after that, there's an epilogue.
Right. Which it might lead into the next book, perchance?
Nope.
You're going to leave it at that?
No, the epilogue has to do with some research I did on years ago on Billy Mitchell. And I found out that General Billy Mitchell, who was kicked out of the Army Air Corps back in I don't know if it was, I don't forget what year it was, but it was, I think it was before, maybe been before or just after the 1920s, somewhere in there, that early 20s or before that. And he was pushing air power, and then Army saying, yeah, well, don't worry about it, and he was upset with that, and he says, look, give it half a chance, I can sink, the Navy, for crying out loud. And they said, you couldn't sink the Navy. He says, yes, we can. And he says, yes, I could. If I had a ship, a Navy ship, a warship, I'd sink it from air power. And he says, ridiculous, couldn't happen.
Huh.
Navy said, nope, it couldn't happen.
Really?
And they said, okay, we'll give you 3 warships to sink.
Wow.
3 battleships.
They had a lot of trust. that they wasn't going to happen, huh?
They had 3 German battleships
Oh, okay.
that they got as reparations for World War I.
Okay.
And what they were going to, the reason they thought they were one up on the General was because they were more compartmentated than the American or British warships.
Okay.
So a American warship was cut into sections,
Right.
and maybe cut down the middle. But the Germans did another, they segregated even in between those 2 sections, and then they cut those in sections too. So you had like multiple layers of protection from a shell going into the ship and sinking it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the decks, of course, were also had armor plated. So he said, yeah, no problem. He sent his planes over and they sank them. And they couldn't believe it. And he was they were very upset with him. And so he said, see, I showed you, and they were real mad. Because there's nothing makes you commander madder than being proven wrong by a guy who's an upstart. So they kicked him out of the military. But he went out and he helped design the B-25 bomber for World War II, which was the first strike the United States made on Japan in May of 1942.
Okay.
Okay, they bombed Tokyo.
Right, right.
So the B-25 Mitchell, it was named after him, was that plane. And so he had predicted in 1923, he wrote a book, that the biggest threat to the United States is Japan, the Empire of Japan, that they will send their fleet north of Hawaii, that they will launch aircraft from that fleet and destroy the naval bases and ships of the United States fleet at Pearl Harbor in 1923.
Yeah, no doubt.
And everybody laughed.
Huh.
Japan that same year launched its first aircraft carrier. And the United States launched its first aircraft that same year. An American ship was called the Langley, I think.
Okay.
Very primitive. But as I said, everybody laughed. I says, and when you look at this book, remember, everybody laughed at General Mitchell until December 7th, 1941.
Yeah.
If you've read this and you want to laugh at it, just remember what happened to...
Right.
You won't want to laugh at this one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information in there, and you're going to find out not only are we as consumers helping them build this large military industrial complex, American industries are also helping.
I see. Well, I'm just curious. I guess one of the things that I think you're conveying is an idea, and I think when we talked earlier, you had mentioned that someone might look at this and say, well, you can draw your own conclusions from this. Am I correct in saying it that way, or would you feel?
I'm leading the person in a way to want them to draw a conclusion on their own. And I don't tell them this is the conclusion.
Right.
That's not what I'm doing.
Right.
Here's the facts. Here's a possibility. Here's it's almost like this is it's prophetic.
I see.
Because there's so much factual information in there that this actually could happen, and to some degree. Okay. I'm not saying that everything in there is going to happen, but I'm just saying I'm giving you enough information as the story goes along that you can follow. And if you follow it, you start asking questions of your own.
Yeah. Even though we will place it on the fiction shelf, at the same time, we want to be cautious to make sure that people understand that that's not just a fictional.
Right.
It's not a fictional.
The information that I'm trying to impart. I use characters to draw you in.
Yeah. Now I did notice at the bottom of this, you said, "Hey, Tom Clancy, I thought of this idea first," because you're thinking to yourself, "Hey, some way, shape, or form, somebody's going to pick this book up. They're going to, maybe they'll write a script out of it or something. Who knows, right?"
You never know.
You never know that's happening. Well, now tell me a little bit about Dave Dot, the person, because I know you've had a history of obviously you've spent a lot of time around the military service. You were in the Navy, correct?
Right.
And you spent time and have been able to travel around the world.
All over the world.
And throughout your travels, I mean, maybe the average person probably doesn't know this, but I mean, most of us are lucky if we get to Canada. So let's look at it from your perspective. Based upon your travels, I mean, you've been to all these countries. Do you think any other country would view this book and say maybe, say they have the same thoughts, or?
I don't know.
I mean, that's a question.
I'd like to think. Well, I mentioned it in the book. There are certain people in this book that are real, and what they said, they said.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
One was a Chinese general who actually got up and said that the Chinese missile capability of China is now capable of launching missiles into Alaska and the west coast of the United States. And the character who is the senior commander of the Chinese military is livid about that, him having made that statement.
Oh, yeah, you give
He
away.
doesn't. You don't want these people showing interest in us.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. The second one is a guy who was an Indian version of Secretary of Defense.
Okay.
Okay, the Indian version. His name is actually in there, and he makes this statement. He's concerned about China's increased military capability and the air bases that they're making now in Tibet. Now, this was before the year 2000 that statement was made. So he's already got that concern on his plate. The problem was Pakistan, is causing so much problems with the Islamic conflict over Kashmir and all that kind of stuff. What people don't understand is China has a chunk of Kashmir.
Oh, yeah.
That's, they're already in the Middle
That's
East.
significant.
Yeah. So you have Pakistan here, you got India here, and you got China already there.
Yeah.
It's all, the three of them right there.
I think a geography lesson would be in order
Yes.
for the average, but just so people would understand that what you're saying is actual, again. Now, did you happen to insert yourself into some of these characters?
No,
I mean, based on your life, I think.
No. Well, no.
I mean, I don't want to take it
No,
again,
no.
But you've had a pretty great life.
I used characters that I served in the military with.
Sure. Familiarity is good.
Yeah, and I know those guys. We lived together for 4 years, so I know them rather well.
Okay.
And I know how they talk. But every one of the characters is, in a sense, they are there. That's what they would do, and that's how they would react, and that's what they would say. They're very professional.
Yeah.
Everybody, you're going to see that this is a story, really, of enlisted men. Trained enlisted men doing their jobs professionally, and that's on. You don't get that much in a military, but it's always the lieutenant said this, and the captain did that, and the general did this, and you never see how they got around to doing that. And it was somebody had to import some information there and tell them.
Well, Dave, I have to ask this too. Is this something that I know you've got a publicist now that works with this, a publisher, I should say, and you're actually getting this book available soon online, or?
You're on Amazon. You're on Barnes & Noble online. You can get it online there too. If you're in Australia, you can get it on Booktopia.
Okay.
And you can also get it on Kindle.
Oh, nice.
So you've got 4 right now so far.
Yeah.
Places that you can get the book.
Well, it's pretty nice that you shared some time with us today. I know it's being an author is not something all of us can do, and especially taking into account that fictional characters versus fact. I don't know, to weave it together like you have, I think it's pretty neat. It's a pretty good way to get the story out there. So, the book being The Dragon Awakens, and it's by David, and you have your middle initial in there, David W. Sr. We look forward to seeing this book on the shelves in libraries, of course, around the country as well. Hopefully that'll be picked up, and when you have an opportunity to visit with us again and maybe talk a little bit more, we'll sit down and discuss this a little at a deeper, better time.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure.
And that is a conversation with David Dott today here in DCTV Studios, and we appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you'll get a chance to see his book and pick it up at all the locations he mentioned. You draw your own conclusions.